Do you want to be a member of the biggest gun sticker club there is, like the Jeep guys or the motorcycle riders? Well, this is your ticket. The Sig P320 X5 Legion. Let's get to work. Hey guys, Work here. Welcome back to Work the Trigger. This is our review of the Sig P320 X5 Legion, full-size, competition-ready pistol from the factory. The holster that you saw me pull it out of is the up-and-coming Harry's Holsters Contender line. You can find a link to Harry's Holsters down in the description below and use Work the Trigger for 10% off. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and get to the pistol. As I said, this is the X5 Legion. Now, the Legion comes in anywhere from about $900 to $1,000, depending on where you find it and what the current state of the gun market is. For that price, you get a freaking gigantic case. This is not your regular tiny little pistol case that barely everything fits in. This is a good-sized pistol case that the Legion comes with. It also comes with 3 17-round magazines with a pretty badass base pad on these things. 2 recoil spring options so you can tune the recoil of it, and a magazine well, which is currently not on my gun. More on that in just a minute. Now, the stock setup on the Legion, go ahead and run that top to bottom. First up at the top, we have fiber optic sights. We've got a fiber optic front, and in the box, additionally, are 2 additional fiber optic rods, one in the green that the gun comes with, and one in red. Now, the rear sight is fully adjustable. However, it's also attached to the rear plate that blocks the cutout for the optic. So when you pull that plate off, you lose your rear sight. Not something I'm overly fond of, but because this is a competition gun, it's also not detrimental to it because I don't really plan on running backup sights on this anyway. Now, if this was a self-defense gun, those backup sights would be absolutely mandatory, and we would have to purchase an additional sight to be able to put on the back of that to co-witness, and a new front sight as well. The X5 does have a 5-inch barrel, and the 5-inch barrel is relatively accurate. You're not talking like CZ accurate. CZs are freaking laser beams. You're talking about Gen 5 Glock accurate, which is accurate enough for most shooters. It's definitely more accurate than I can consistently shoot, but I did notice a difference in accuracy going from a CZ to this. CZs are known for having relatively accurate barrels. Working down from there, we do have an ambidextrous slide stop slide release. Now, the reason that I personally like the slide stop slide release is not because it's ambidextrous, it's because of the location of it. It's placed back further in the frame compared to a lot of other guns, especially double action, single action guns. and me and my tiny little child hands can actually reach this particular one. So I can do insert fresh mag, drop the slide with the slide release. That's something that I've never really been able to do before with double action, single action guns, because my thumb just isn't long enough to get up there. So I always either have to drop the slide with my support hand or rack the slide. So that slide release actually sits in one of the coolest features of our X5 here, and that is the frame. The frame of the X5, though it looks like a standard polymer frame that's just colored gray, is not a standard polymer frame. This frame has tungsten infused within the polymer. That's right, tungsten metal is actually infused into this, increasing the weight of this firearm drastically. In addition to that, it's also got a gigantic tungsten rod in the back of the grip here, right back behind where the magazine sits, to give it additional weight and additional balance back towards the rear and bottom of the gun, pulling the gun back down upon recoil. It does also have a reversible magazine release, which is a nice shape. I actually like the triangular shape that they have on this mag release. It is significantly more comfortable than the mag release on a P365. Next up, let's talk about the trigger. The stock trigger on the X5, trigger pull weight is about 3.5 pounds. Now, that weight pull is very nice. It does give you a nice light trigger. However, the trigger pull is also very sloppy. It's got a very long stage, a very long break. It's not a nice crisp break. And then the reset is extraordinarily long. Long enough to the point where during the Carry Optics shootout video that we had, every single shooter short stroked the trigger on a stock X5 at least once. This is something that you can fix later on, and I'll bring up a couple of options for that later on in the video, but the stock trigger on the X5, nothing positive to write home about. If you do write home about it, it's going to be a pretty scathing review. So down from that is the grip texture. The X5's got a really interesting grip texture here. It's kind of like a crinkled texture, but it actually holds on to your hand relatively well. It's not deep cutting like a CZP10 or the aftermarket grips that you put on a Q5 or a Shadow 2. But it does give you enough grip that you can adequately hold the handgun and it's not going to slip out of your hands. It slides where it's supposed to slide and it grips where it's supposed to grip. So the next feature on it is the magazine well. So from the factory, the X5 comes with an extended magazine well. It gives you about 3/8 of an inch to 1/2 of an inch of additional material and a very nice funnel on the bottom so you can smoothly insert magazines through this into the pistol. Mine is not on because this is my competition gun. I run USPSA Carry Optics division with this gun, and in that division, you cannot run extended magazine wells. So I have to take this little cool feature off. It does come with 3 of Sig's 17-round P320 magazines. However, the base pads have been replaced with a very unique base pad. It's an aluminum base pad. It's about 1/4 inch thick to be able to get past the magazine well here, but it's also got this nice texture on the bottom, which gives you a positive insertion so you're not sliding around on the magazine. I actually really like these magazine base pads on here. So with all that being said, my example here, a couple of the things that I did to mine, because mine is no longer stock, and some of those things are related to some points I've made before. So my particular gun here, I've done 3 things to. I have replaced the optic on it. Again, this is a C&H precision weaponry plate, and it's rocking a Holosun 507C on top. Now, why a 507C? I had a spare one. Eventually, we'll be getting a Trijicon SRO, but for right now, this is what I can afford. I've also replaced the trigger with a Grey Guns trigger. Now, the Grey Guns trigger dropped the trigger pull weight down to about 2.5 pounds, shortened the reset, shortened the overall pull. It did greatly improve the trigger. However, it's still not a great trigger in this gun. The stock trigger in a P10C, in my opinion, is still better than this gun. The Q5SF is still a better trigger in this gun, and you can get a better trigger in the Glock if you upgrade it. And my last modification to this is an issue with my hand size and how I grip guns. I grip guns apparently relatively high. And while gripping this gun and firing for extended periods of time, I noticed that it had a ledge on the back of the frame, and that ledge on the back of the frame dug into my hand and made it extremely uncomfortable to shoot after a couple hundred rounds, which is not acceptable to me, quite honestly. So I actually had to my brand new $1,000 gun, take sandpaper to it and clean up that ridge line where the back strap molded up into the frame and make it a little bit smoother in order to make this thing comfortable for it. I had to essentially make Sig's gun fit a human-shaped hand rather than whatever robotic thing they designed it around. Once I did that, however, it completely changed the gun and completely changed the way it shot. It became more controllable, it became more comfortable, and I actually like shooting the gun again. Okay, so now for probably the part that y'all have been waiting for. How does this thing shoot? So it does shoot extremely smooth, but the recoil impulse is different from a lot of the other guns that you might shoot. Because it does have a higher bore axis, you are going to feel the impulse a little bit higher. Now that doesn't lend itself to excessive muzzle flip or anything, especially with the system they've got with being able to swap out the recoil springs and just the pure weight of this gun. But it is going to feel different, so it is going to take you a little bit of getting used to be able to get it back on target faster than some of those other guns. But when you do get used to it, you will be able to get it back on target as fast, if not faster, than some of the other options. The slide on this gun is relatively big. Despite having lightning cuts up here at the top, it's a relatively heavy slide, especially when you slap an optic on it. That does work in your favor, however, because although it does slow down the slide mass a little bit, it also tames that recoil a little. The stock trigger, as I said, isn't great, and it lends itself to short stroking when you're trying to shoot fast. But there are a few upgrades that you can actually use to improve that. As I said, mine is a gray gun. So there's also one out there from Apex. They've got a good trigger that you can use. So there are options to be able to improve the trigger in this thing, and I would suggest doing that if you're going to take competition seriously at all. So as I said, that stock frame design on the rear, not the most comfortable. Some people don't mind it at all. I'm assuming those people have like adult-sized hands, but I don't. So I did have to clean it up, but now that doesn't bother me at all either. The accuracy on it, as I said, is acceptable. It is more than enough for competition shooting, but you're not going to go target shooting with this thing. You're not going to be spreading quarter-inch groups at 25 yards with this gun. And last, the mag changes in use. So Sig relied a little bit too heavily, in my opinion, on the magazine well, and didn't focus enough on the frame without the magazine well for those of us in divisions where you can't have them. I would have liked to see a little bit more flaring on the magazine well of the frame itself, rather than relying purely on the added magazine well that they put on it from the factory, because the magazine well does not give you a whole lot of space to be able to flub a reload, and it would have been nice to get a little bit more than that. I may go ahead and clean this up a little bit myself, see what we can pull off there, but I would have liked them from the factory to increase that size just a little bit. Alright, so the Legion is a middle price, decent feature, acceptable accuracy competition firearm. It's optics ready. Being a P320, it's got an excellent aftermarket, making it extremely easy to customize to your own likings. Add to that great reliability, a smooth controllable recoil impulse, and just the fact that it's a great looking gun, and you've got yourself an excellent contender for about $1,000. Couple of the things that kind of pull it back a little bit, that high bore axis. If they could decrease that bore axis just a little bit, it would improve this gun even more. The less than preferred stock trigger in this, making you have to upgrade that if you want to be able to compete seriously, is just annoying. Let's be honest, when you buy a gun for $1,000, you don't want to just turn around and have to start upgrading immediately, but with this, you kinda do. That mixed in with the weird shape of the frame in the back, and the fact that you do have to get an optics plate adapter to be able to mount a non-SIG optics, are definitely things that you're going to want to think about before getting one of these. That's it for this time, guys. I hope you liked the review of the Sig Sauer P320 X5 Legion. One of the best bang for the buck, out of the box, entry-level competitions that you can find. If you're adverse to modification, may not be your cup of tea, but if you are looking into taking competition seriously and you're on a budget, take a look at it. It definitely belongs in your consideration. Thanks again, guys. If you found this video useful, go ahead and like and subscribe down below. If you've got your own opinions about the X5, go ahead and write those down in the comments. I'm always interested in what everybody else's opinions are, even if we don't share them. Remember, guys, I appreciate every one of you, and until next time, do your research, get informed, and get to work.